And my dad came in and yelled at me one day, probably because I wasn't doing my homework, probably a very good reason. But he basically yelled at me and said, "When are you going to stop watching all these damn cartoons?" And I remember making myself a promise when I was 6 years old that when I grew up and became an adult, I would still like cartoons, right? And it got sort of reinforced when I was probably around 12 or so. I caught my mother sitting in the living room reading a novel. I was a huge fan of The Hobbit. My mom had read me The Hobbit. I had watched the animated film from the 70s. I was Hobbit all the time, all day, all the time. And, but my mom was reading this book that was a big person's book. It was this big, thick novel with a gray cover. I had no pictures in it. And I looked over her shoulder and I read the word Gandalf. And I went, what was that? What is Gandalf doing in your book? And I said, well, this is another story about Gandalf. It's called The Lord of the Rings. I said, yeah, but that's a big person's book. Well, big people can read about Gandalf. Really? I'm reading about Gandalf. That's what I'm going to do. So from then on, I've just always sort of had a fascination with animation and animated storytelling. And when it became clear that it was a viable opportunity for me in terms of a vocation, I had to pursue it. If I had been born, I mean, I do love theater, and if I had but the kind of theater that I like to do doesn't get done in America very often. The kind of theater I like to do is like mask work and puppetry and the kind of stuff you see at Cirque du Soleil, right? It's not Death of a Salesman. As great as Death of a Salesman is, that's not really my bag. I'd rather be doing something crazy with masks and stuff like that. And so I had a choice. If I wanted to do that kind of theater, I either had to found my own theater company to do that sort of thing, or I could do this animation thing. And the animation was just far too seductive. I got too wrapped up in that. And so that's sort of where I went. And that's what I do. And if for some reason I couldn't voice act, I'd probably be doing something else related to storytelling. I mean, that's why I'm sort of excited about expanding my scholarship and doing more work with that. Because that is what I would want to do. And I'd probably, if I couldn't voice act for anymore, I'd probably get into writing more. I'd probably sort of go full bore into writing. Either scholastic writing or storytelling, screenwriting, script writing, stuff like that. That's probably what I would do. You bet.